Welcome, boys and girls, to another football episode between myself and Robert Ferringo next. It's week 6 of college football, week 5 of the NFL. Can't believe we're in week 5 already. Again, this is Rafael Esparza from Doc Sports Service. Robert Ferringo's next to me on the screen. And don't forget to check out all our wonderful stuff we have on the descriptions. Click that link to get that 60 free member stuff. You can get on any handicapper you want, myself, Ferringo. You don't even have to buy football with it. You got baseball playoffs, which is already started on there. We got the NHL that drops the puck on Friday. The NBA's pretty soon. College basketball, which me and Fringo love us some college hoops. That's just around the corner of his room, so you don't have to use that 60 free thing just on football. You can pick any sport you want. Good afternoon, Robert. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm glad you survived your Florida / I can't believe I'm driving in flooded area back home. So I'm glad you got to feel what I feel here in the dirty South. So welcome to my world from June to November.
Yeah, if anybody was wondering where we were last week, I was in Florida in the path of the hurricane. So what are the odds, Raphael, of not one but two of our shows getting canceled in the first month due to hurricanes? But I'm back in Atlanta now, hunkered down and ready to get into the fall.
I do not do betting odds for hurricanes because I still live in the Gulf of Mexico. Once I move out of the Gulf of Mexico, you'll be seeing a lot of weather odds coming from my brain. But until then, nope, not for me. I do not want to mess with Mother Nature when I'm in her path. But again, it's week 5 in the NFL, week 6 in college football. This should be a great, I believe, NFL card. College football took a little step back. We saw some great games last week, especially the Georgia game. I don't see that many key games like we saw last week. But what NFL or college football game you have circled as one of the games you can't wait to watch, bet, or just sit back and enjoy?
Well, it's probably not the one I'm going to most enjoy, but it was the one that when I was looking at the odds jumped out at me. It was one of the games I circled as a kind of a curious line movement earlier in the week. And that's Central Florida. This one absolutely won't be on my card. Last week, I had my biggest bet of the college football season in a single game and my worst bet of a college football game. I said Central Florida over Colorado last week. And again, if we had our show last week, that would have been one of the lines that we talked about, that massive spread, that massive favorite that Central Florida was against Colorado. Was that some kind of indicator? Was it an overreaction to Colorado? It was obviously an overreaction to Colorado. So this week, Central Florida, who just got pasted by Colorado at home in a blackout game in the Bounce House, they're now going on the road to face Florida. Now, Florida isn't a very good team. We know that Billy Napier is, I don't even want to say he's on the hot seat. He's on the way out. There's no way he's going to survive this season, not with that ridiculous schedule they have in the back half. But Central Florida has to be rattled after that game last week. They're on the road in Florida. The Gators coming off a bye week, and this number opened with Florida just -1.5. But then the line has shifted. It is now Central Florida -3. So, Raphael, what am I missing here? Why is it looks like there's a 50-50 split on tickets, okay, which you don't put any stock into. I generally do because it gives me an idea of where the public is looking. Obviously, money coming in on Central Florida, but why? What did they see last week with them getting ramrodded by Colorado that I didn't, that would make this line move 4.5 points?
It's Florida. The only thing that's happened positive in Florida was Ole Miss lost, and now we can talk about Lane Kiffin maybe being the new head coach of the Florida Gators. This is people fading the Florida Gators right now. Not big whale money or sharp money, just a lot of big type money. That just tells me a lot of maybe 5K bets here, back and forth in here. Public money taking the other side, but I'm just thinking small sharp money came in. I think that's why UCF. But I think most of that is just let's fade Florida. We already know Napier's gone. Maybe Kiffin could lose another game this week to maybe South Carolina, and we can start building his home or building his office as we speak right now. But I just think that's just money coming in thinking, hey, let's just fade Florida because their new head coach is probably getting ready to come in.
Central Florida, they have only beaten New Hampshire and Sam Houston State, and then they had a comeback win against a pretty middling TCU team. I agree with you that Florida's not very good. I think Graham Mertz is a terrible quarterback. They're not even fully committed to him. Going with the young guy who's going to be the quarterback this week is kind of a question. However, Raphael, am I crazy to think that, when we look back at Florida's 2 losses to Texas A&M and a very good Miami team, that those don't really look like bad losses right now? So is it crazy to think that maybe people aren't giving Florida enough credit, that they're not going to be very good? We know what, Billy Napier is headed to the gallows. I understand all that. But in evaluating these 2 teams, am I crazy to think that Florida has a little bit more talent than Central Florida?
They do, but we're in a different life of college football, or like to call it AAA football. It's not college football. These kids maybe have backed out. These kids are maybe like, hey, you know what? I'm going to hit the transfer portal because we stink. We already lost to Florida. We already lost to Texas A&M. We don't know what that locker room looks like. We don't know what the practice looks like. Have some players already checked out because the way they started their season? I think that's what we have to kind of look at. And how I look at handicapping now, I look at that aspect. Okay, did you just lose back-to-back games? Or some of these players might want to rethink about transferring out. There's a transfer portal rumor website that you can go on and already see stuff like that. So I'm actually approaching a lot of my games that I think players may be jumping ship and stuff like that, because we're going to see a lot of it. Everyone wants to say UNLV is the headline of college football right now, still, because of what happened at quarterback. It's going to trend to a lot of different aspects. So I have a feeling maybe that's why some money or some people keep on fading Florida when they do have the better talent. If ands or buts, they're probably third string players could probably start at UCF. But when do those players start thinking, hey, you know what? I just don't like this program. I need out.
All right, Raphael, who's the college football game that you had circled that you found the line interesting or jumped off the page at you when you were first looking at the board?
This one's very interesting because I'm going to go to Wolfpack of NC State, which everyone thought they were going to be much better than they were when the season started. They're almost like the Virginia Tech, which I thought were going to maybe be much better in the ACC, and then they just flew out of dud, especially last week when they thought they won the game. They didn't win the game, just bad reffing in that Miami game. But NC State, 5.5 right now. And right when we started recording the Almighty Circle, that's what we have to call them. We have to call them the Almighty Circle, not just Circle Sportsbook. Moved it to 4.5. And I was going to say, hey, if you wait to see this number comes down to 5, then I'm really going to jump and I'm really going to kick myself that I can't add this to my card if the number keeps on dropping. And what does the Almighty Circle do? They move it a whole point down to 4.5. I just like this NC State team in this situation, not for the rest of the season. In this situation, they're at home. They're playing a weak team. I'm not sold on Wake Forest. Wasn't sold on them all season long. I just think NC State has the better talent, has the better defense, which we've seen a little bit last week on their defense, beating Northern Illinois, which we all know who Northern Illinois beat. They still talk about it. They beat Notre Dame, which is not that big. I just think Notre Dame was sleepwalking in that game. Well, that could be another story for another day. But they beat Northern Illinois, but their defense was more impressive of NC State. I think that's why I like the line at 5.5, thinking it would come down a little bit to 5. But wow, 4.5 right now. If it continues to drop down, I'm going to be kicking myself because, like I said, I wish I could have been put it on my card for Thursday. But wow, NC State, if it continues to drop, wait to get this number, because I think the trends are telling me that we might see a 4.5. We're all across the board, but I like NC State right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I actually used NC State against Northern Illinois last week. That number was like 6.5 when we posted. I know it closed at 7.5. So some people lost and some people pushed, but that's why you take advantage of the early line value, right? And I do think a lot of people were on the bandwagon and jumped off when it went into the ditch early in the season for NC State. They have some issues on their offensive line and at quarterback. I understand all of that. But, they've been a very good, solid B-plus ACC program for at least the last decade. So I think that there's some value here, picking them up off the scrap heap. I kind of agree with you with Wake Forest. They've always been a very dangerous underdog under Dave Clawson. But I think the bottom has dropped out. He was able to nab. He had good quarterback play there for about 6 or 7 years, and that was able to kind of prop up and paper over a lot of the problems with this really small school program. But that's not the case anymore. Wake Forest is 1-8 straight up and against the spread in their last 9 games. Their only win this year, I believe, is against North Carolina A&T. They're 0-7 against the spread in their last 7 games. And I don't think that we found the bottom yet for Wake Forest. And I do think that NC State is motivated. They didn't have the non-conference success that they were hoping to, but they can still make up for it in conference play. And going back to what I was talking about with Florida, if you look at NC State, the 2 teams that pasted them, Tennessee and Clemson.
Yeah, not bad games.
They're pretty good. Yeah, like I understand that they got whooped a lot worse than people were expecting in both of those games, but not really bad losses. They weren't great in their wins over Louisiana Tech and Northern Illinois. Wake Forest isn't a great team. They don't have to be great in this team. I think the number is moving the wrong way.
When they lost to North Carolina A&T, I think they lost the halftime band show too against North Carolina A&T. So that was bad. It was 2 bad losses because no one beats North Carolina A&T Aggies band.
All right, Raphael. Most of our games this week that we circled and that we plan on talking about are in the NFL. Your favorite. So why don't you?
I have one more college football game that I want to talk about.
Oh, all right. Oh, wow. All right. Let's jump into it.
I'm going to stay. We were discussing today about what games we're going to pick, and I stuck with it. Tulane at UAB because this Tulane offense. Their last 2 games, they've scored 96 points in their last 2 games. Their offense has been rolling. They can score on the road. We saw them score at the Raging Cajuns of UNLV Lafayette 2 weeks ago. And this UAB team just stinks. I just don't think they have anything to cover the wide receivers that Tulane have. Big wide receivers at Tulane have. Their last 6 games, UAB has played 5 of them have gone over the total. I just think it's going to be a high-scoring game. Yeah, I know most of the trends for Tulane says bet the under, but a lot of those trends were last year when they were running the ball a lot. This year, they're throwing the ball a lot of tight end screens where the offensive line is just getting out and just mowing them all down. I like this passing game at Tulane. I just think 55 is probably going to stay. I don't see that much line movement going on. I don't think it's going to drop to 54 or 54.5. And if it does move, maybe a half a point. I don't think that much line movement on the total. But I just like the offense of Tulane being able to score on UMB. So I just like this over one game.
Yeah, things really aren't working out so well for the fighting Dilfers, huh? I will admit that Tulane is a team that I was wrong about heading into this season. They lost their coach.
Me too.
They lost their star quarterback. If you look back, there were a lot of statistical indicators pointing for them to take a step back. But it's not just the success that they've had going 4-1 against the spread and almost beating Kansas State and blowing out South Florida. It's how good they've looked. Like, I'm with you. I watched a lot of that South Florida Tulane game last week. They looked good. It wasn't that they caught South Florida in a letdown spot, which they did. But that's a pretty good South Florida team, and they were running all over the field. Every time they had the ball, there were guys running free for Tulane. So Tulane is kind of a stay-away team for me because that trapdoor still might drop out on them as the season goes on. But this team is much better than I thought they were going to be.
They're fun to watch. And again, they have a whole new coaching staff, quarterbacks from last year. Pratt's in the NFL right now. So, yeah, I'm a little bit shocked how they switched last year, big running game. This year, totally opposite.
All right, now we can shift to your NFL game. What was the first NFL game that jumped out at you?
I'm going to go with the New York Jets. Well, first of all, we're going to Tottenham Stadium. And if I'm going to watch a game at Tottenham Stadium, it better be the Tottenham Spurs, not the NFL of the Jets versus the Vikings. Give me the Spurs. Give me Kane out there scoring goals for me early in the morning or Saturday or Sunday. Give me English Premier League, not the NFL in Tottenham. But if I'm forced to watch the NFL on Sunday when I'm doing my other stuff, I guess I can watch Aaron Rodgers and the Jets versus the Minnesota undefeated Vikings. Raise your hand, and I'm talking to you, producer lady, too. Raise your hand if you thought the Vikings would be perfect right now in week 5. No, you did not. You did not think the Vikings would be perfect. And this is a great situation for the Jets. You're coming off a bad loss. Only 10-9 was the final. I thought we almost had more runs in yesterday's baseball games, all 4 baseball games that we saw in this game if it wasn't for the Brewers and Mets. But a 10-9 loss. What do you do when you have everyone's talking about, oh, you're fighting with your head coach. Oh, you need Tavante Adams. Oh, the Jets are not as good as what you want. Well, you know what you need? Get out of the country. That's what you need. Play a game overseas where you don't have to hear the press. I like the Jets to get the first loss to the Minnesota Vikings. I think their defense will play a little better on the road. Aaron Rodgers, I don't think they're going to have that many penalties like we saw against a 10-9 final where we saw last week where offsides was going all over the place. I think we'll see a better showing for the New York Jets, not on the road, across the country road in this game. I like the Jets to beat the Vikings in this game.
Interesting. I want nothing to do with the Jets because the Jets just aren't very good. They've gotten a lot of hype over the last, let's call it 16 months. They've had an inordinate amount of hype coming into this season, I feel like, because there's a lot of people in the media that are Jets fans. So the Jets get talked about a lot more than they actually deserve. They're a mediocre team. They're not any good. Aaron Rodgers isn't that guy anymore. That offensive line is bad. Their skill position players are overrated. They're really bad on that side of the ball. The thing I'm looking at in this game is maybe the under. The Jets defense is still legit, and it has looked the part the last 2 or 3 weeks. It looks like a dominating top 8 type of defense, again, after getting freight trained by San Francisco. But there's no way I'm taking the Jets over skis because they're kind of a circus. The Vikings defense has been very good, and Minnesota is not just 4-0. They have good wins. They've beaten good teams. They beat Green Bay. They beat Houston. They beat that San Francisco team that just walked through the Jets like they were made of paper, basically. So, I do think that this Jets team can force Sam Darnold into some turnovers. I know Sam Darnold is off to a great start, but at his core, he's still that guy. He had a couple near interceptions last week in that game against Green Bay. And frankly, if Green Bay hadn't turned the ball over so much, especially 2 just back-breaking turnovers in the last 7 minutes of that game, both forced by safety Byron Murphy by Minnesota, then I think the Packers come back and win that game. And then this one has a completely different feel to it going overseas. But, I'll be looking at the under because of how well that Vikings defense is playing and how bad the Jets offense is. So I may look at the total in that game, but I'm not jumping back on the Jets wagon. They stink. They're not any good.
Yeah, but that second half defense that the Vikings played is probably one of the main reasons why I like this situation. The defense, how poorly the defense played in the second half, how easily they could have gave up. We could have saw another Georgia, Alabama part 2 on Sunday with a blown lead. I'm just not sold on that defense. And like I said, I know the Jets have been struggling on offense, but when you have all that negativity around you with the media and stuff like that, what do you need? Get out of town. So I just think they're going to play much better.
That I'll buy. We've seen that consistently through the first months of the season, right? Team takes a really bad loss, comes back and plays much better the following week. Kind of that we have kind of a zigzag theory going on in the NFL right now. So I'll buy that with the Jets. But, the Green Bay offense and their level of execution, their game plan, their talent, and their quarterback play versus the Jets, it's not really the same thing. So I'm not looking for that.
You're also getting plus 2.5. And Joe Public is going to move this as 3. There's 1-3 out there already. So people are going to look at the records and the websites. ESPN says they're 4-0. And the Jets just lost 10-9 to the horrible Broncos. I'm going to take the parlay cards and the teasers and parlays on the undefeated Minnesota Vikings. We'll see probably a solid 3 by Sunday. So now I'm getting plus 3 with the Jets at Tottenham Stadium.
In keeping with that zigzag theory, Raphael, the game that jumped out at me for the number that made me kind of pause for a second, be like, what's going on here, is the Buffalo-Houston game. It's not very often that you see a team get absolutely pasted by 25 points in prime time one week and then come back as a road favorite against a playoff team the next week. So what am I missing here with Buffalo being favored by 1 point at Houston in the Stephon Diggs revenge game?
Yeah, it's the Stephon Diggs revenge game. I agree with you on this one. I just think people realize that maybe Houston took a step backwards this year coming in. They're not as hot, even though I think they had the best offseason, but they haven't looked like they've had the best offseason coming into week 5 in the NFL, but no better in the NFL or in the sports. The only people who are looked really good so far this year are the sports books because everyone else has been puzzling on how their teams or how their actions look. I agree with the actions coming in. The best quarterback right now playing is probably the guy in Buffalo, even though they struggled against the Baltimore Ravens. But right now, Josh Allen is playing some good ball. And I think they're just saying, hey, you know what? If I'm going to go on this one, I'm going to take Allen over a sophomore, maybe a sophomore slump kind of a quarterback who's not been showing his numbers like he did last year.
I'll agree that Houston isn't as good as people maybe think they are. They're 0-5 against the spread in their last 5 games, right? They haven't covered a spread yet this year, which is kind of an indicator that they're overvalued, right? I'll buy that. But I don't know about the Bills, man. Right now, they have so many injuries and so many problems on defense. And I understand that Josh Allen is papering over a lot of those problems, but we kind of saw it laid bare against Baltimore. Is this team isn't as good as the Buffalo team that they've been packing the last few years. And as I mentioned, Houston is not a pushover. I don't really understand. I think that they should be a small favorite, maybe a 1.5 point favorite in this game. Buffalo's been very good. I believe they're 14-4 straight up after a loss over the last 3 or 4 years. So I understand the bounce back mentality with the Bills, but they got beat up by Baltimore. And some of those problems that they showed in that game aren't going to go away. And I just, they almost lost to Arizona early on. Those wins over Jacksonville and Miami really aren't as impressive with how bad that both of those teams have looked right now. So Buffalo is still a team that I am not ready to buy back into. And I don't know, back-to-back road games. I just don't think that they should be favored in this game. Maybe they win, maybe they don't. I don't know, but I'm just looking at this number. And I don't think it's right. I think that Houston should be a small 1.5 point favorite. So, all right, what do you got for us next?
It's your team. Who's your team? Who's your team, Fringo? Who do you like?
Bears fan, unfortunately.
I'm going to take the Bears at -3.5 over to Carolina. And this one will go to 4.5. And everyone wants to say, oh, the Bears picked wrong. They should have taken Daniels. They should have taken this. And Caleb Williams played nice. He had a great game last week. He didn't throw an interception. He didn't have to throw 52 times like he did 2 weeks ago. That game where he threw 52 times, he threw more passes than the Chicago Cubs bullpen threw that day, which is an unbelievable stat that I like to say. I like the way this offense is finally starting to improve. The offensive line is getting a little bit better, even though every time I do watch the Bears game, Caleb Williams is on his back. But last week they played a lot better. And I know Carolina's coming off a great showing with the Red Rifle, but that was just one game. Now, how are they going to go back to back where people have film on Carolina and the Red Rifle behind center? I like the Bears defense on that reason. I think the Bears defense is the big reason why they win this game and cover this number. I really thought this number was going to open up at 4.5. So getting 3.5, I maybe take a shot at maybe buying that 0.5 point down just to get it off that 3 and just take the 3 and maybe just get a push if it does land in that and get off that 0.5 point. And that would still take the 4 because the defense is going to be the big key here. I don't think Carolina is going to be able to score points on that Bears team like they did last week. I just like the defensive play of Chicago more than the offense. So I like the Bears in this spot.
Yeah, any of the talk about Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams right now is kind of ridiculous. This is kind of just what people do, right? This is what square bettors do. This is what the public does. This is what the media does. It's been a month. It's been 4 games. And I promise you, if Jaden Daniels were on Chicago and Caleb Williams was in the system that Washington's running, the numbers would be flip-flop. Like, just because Caleb Williams went number 1 overall doesn't mean that none of those other quarterbacks are going to be any good. Like, Jaden Daniels, pretty good. He's going to be a pretty good quarterback. But let's slow down on saying that not you saying that, but people saying that the Bears made a mistake. I mean, remember, RG3 had a better rookie season than Andrew Luck. Which one of them turned out to be the far better quarterback? We've kind of been down this road before, but I agree with you that this game will probably be decided by the defense. That's why I'm kind of looking at the total. I'm kind of getting a little bit of an over vibe from this game. Andy Dalton has been able to give that Carolina offense a jolt. They've scored 60 points in the last 2 games. And again, just watching them, they're taking shots down the field. Andy Dalton can just do things that Bryce Young can't at this point in his career. He can just process a lot faster than Bryce Young can. So I'm looking for Carolina to continue to score points. The difference here is that Carolina's defense is a train wreck right now. They're really, really bad. They already lost Eric Brown. We know they got rid of Brian Brown in the off season. They just lost Shaq Thompson for the year. I think they have 7 guys from the defensive side of the ball on injured reserve right now. I believe 4 of them were starters at the beginning of the year. This wasn't a very good defense to begin with. So now the fact that they're losing kind of key people, this is going to create an opportunity for a Bears offense that is starting to show some signs of life. I also think that the Bears were a little bit lucky last week to only allow the amount of points that they did against the Rams. They were helped out big time by their punter, and the Rams just didn't execute in Chicago's half of the field. Now I know that you're saying that you like the Bears here. You trust the Bears laying points right now, Raphael?
I trust the Bears laying points because you hit the nail right on the button. Because that defense has been awful in Carolina, and their defensive injury list is as bad as long as the Rams' offensive injury list is right now. So I just think with the injuries that Carolina has that you mentioned, and then to see the Bears running the ball a little bit more to keep the pressure off Caleb Williams, that's been their Achilles heel so far in their offense. They have not been able to run the ball. But what do you need to run the ball? Play a bad team that can't stop the run and defense and get the pressure off Caleb Williams. So I just like the scenario of Carolina's bad defense and the Bears playing a little bit better offense last week. And Caleb Williams didn't throw a pick. So there has to probably be a little bit momentum coming in. Hey, you know what? We won last week. I didn't have an interception. Yes, I still on my back 4 times. Whether we can improve on that, let's run the ball a little bit more this week against a bad defense.
Yeah, the Bears did beat Carolina, a little bit better Carolina team, I think, last year. This is one of those games I'm with you. I hope the Bears win because I feel like it's going to create some value betting against them. They're still not a very good team. Remember, they got outgained again last week. They got outgained by about 80 yards. They won that game. They've been outgained in both of their wins this year. They only had 2. They looked better offensively. I grant you that last week. They still only had like 260 yards of total offense. So there's still major problems with that Chicago offense. Basically, questionable scheme, really below average offensive line, below average to bad offensive line, and rookie quarterback. So we're going to see a lot of ups and downs. I don't know if I trust them laying over a field goal here. So, all right, one team that has earned our trust over the years is the Kansas City Chiefs. All they do is win, right? They're 4-0. They're cruising towards that three-peat. They are back in prime time, and they opened up as a 6-point favorite against New Orleans. Now, that jumped out at me a little bit. Thought that number was a little bit high. And then also that overnight line movement. That line opened at 6 on Sunday night, got my attention. By Monday morning, it was down to 5. Raphael, what are your thoughts here about the Saints and the Chiefs and that number, not only where it is, but where it's moving?
It should be the injury bowl game right here because both teams have some really, really bad injuries. We won't know who's playing and not playing. Is Hill going to play for the Saints? Is Kamara the only reason why he played last week because he was at home? He told everyone if he wasn't playing in Atlanta, he probably wouldn't be playing at all. So now he's coming back a little bit more beat up because they used him a lot last week in Atlanta in that bad home road loss to a division team, the Falcons. So there's a lot of injuries, especially on the defensive side of the Saints. They lost another offensive lineman last week. So I think there's a lot of injuries because we could talk about all the wide receiver injuries that Kansas City has. I want nothing to do with this game just because of the injuries on both sides. But I'm going to be very curious to see what this number finally goes to on a solid day, like on a Sunday night to Monday, just because of the big names that are still on that injury list for who's not playing. And I know everyone says, ooh, Travis Kelce had a Kelce day. This has to be one of the world's worst 4-0 teams I have seen in a very, very long time in the NFL. They've played some ugly games. They played some ugly teams that we thought maybe were going to be much better, and they're not, and they got the early W's from them. But just because he had a nice one game, Travis Kelce is not the same Travis Kelce. I think he's eating too much Cinnamon Toast Crunch in these cereal commercials I see every time I turn the TV on.
Yeah, I wrote in my NFL Power Rankings, which come out every Tuesday at DocSports.com, that Kansas City, this feels like the time of the year when they kind of take a step back, right? When they just kind of look at their watch, they're like, all right, we're 4-0, wake us up when it's the stretch run or the playoffs or whatever. I could really honestly see them being like a 5-4 team over the next 2 months, right? They did it last year in the regular season. They have not been some dominant regular season team. They have not been, the number 1 seed every year, just rolling through the regular season during this kind of dynasty run. They do have a lot of injuries. They do have older players, like you mentioned with Travis Kelce, okay? With all the injuries that they have on offense right now at the receiver position, they have a question to ask. All right, are we just going to ride Travis Kelce for the next 6 weeks and give him 12, 13 targets a game like he has gotten kind of throughout his career and when he is in his prime? But if they do that, aren't they risking him either A, getting hurt himself, or B, not having that extra juice when it comes to the playoffs when they actually need him? So I just don't think that they're going to max him out to make up for some of these other injury issues that they're dealing with right now. I think New Orleans is a little bit more the desperate team. And Raphael, I got to ask you something. Shouldn't we be blindly betting New Orleans in this game just because they are an underdog of 5 points or more? That's been the trend, right? I believe they're 13 and underdogs of 5 points or more, 13-2 against the spread in the last 15 in the NFL, 9-2 in their last 11. And that includes 5 outright upset wins. We've seen that consistently over the last 2 or 3 weeks, these big underdogs, not just covering spreads, but winning games. So injuries aside, just looking at the numbers, right? Just looking at the odds, shouldn't we be blindly betting the Saints here?
If it goes to 6.5, then I'm probably going to jump on the Saints.
You think? Wait. You think it's going to go back up? That number came from 6 down to 5. Do you anticipate that number climbing higher?
Yeah.
You think it'll get back to 6?
Yeah, because it's a Sunday night game, and there's only one Monday night football game this week, not 2. I'm glad I was suffered to watch the Titans-Dolphins game for 2 Monday night games. There's only one, so we know what the public and the bettors do on Monday nights: favorite it over. It doesn't matter who's playing, and they're gonna see the Kansas City Chiefs. They're gonna see their record. They're gonna see the Saints, and they're gonna bet. Oh, I'm gonna bet the Kansas City Chiefs. So it wouldn't shock me if we go back to 6. I'm just wishful thinking on the 6.5, but I think this will close at 6. The total will probably, just because of the primetime game and all the injuries, probably around 43.5. I think that will probably go around it. But if I had to choose anything, I'd probably look at the Saints on this spot, just because with all the injuries to Kansas City is not going to ride Kelce. They're going to ride their defense. We're going to see a lot of field position, punting, and stuff like that, and let their defense try to win games, because I don't see them getting any extra help at wide receivers. If people keep on telling me, what about Devontae Adams? There's no way the Raiders are going to trade Devontae Adams to Kansas City Chiefs. There's no possible way that's going to happen. So they're going to have to ride that one. But if you look at the Chiefs' schedule, they have the Saints, then they have the 49, they're at San Francisco. But after that, they're at the Raiders, at the Tampa Bay, then the Broncos. I mean, they got some easy schedules coming up, so it's going to be very interesting. But if I can get 5.5 or 6, I think it's the only way I'll probably look at the Saints.
All right, Raphael, take us out of here. You got a free play for the peoples?
I'm going to Thursday Night Football. I'm going to go in your neck of the woods. Not only do I like the Falcons, but I also like that you can get Chick-fil-A on Thursday at the stadium, because it's a Thursday, not a Sunday. So it's a 1.5. And I just think a big win against Atlanta last week against Division. Now Tampa Bay comes here. This play is only if Bijan Robinson plays. If he doesn't play, scratch it. Don't bet it. Don't just sit back and watch it. Enjoy your Chick-fil-A. But if Robinson does play, then I think I like the laying only 1.5 at home, coming off a big division win against the Saints last game. I think they can try to come back and get another big division win on this one. So I like the Falcons at home. But again, if Robinson's not in, I wouldn't bet it.
All right, I'm going to go with one of the games that we talked about, and that's the Carolina-Chicago game. As I mentioned, I like the over here. This Carolina defense is a mess. The Bears offense hasn't been very good, doesn't look very good. If they can't rack up 300, 350 total yards and score 20 plus points in this game, then there's really just no hope for them. And Chicago's been great with that bend but don't break cover 2 defensive scheme. Carolina's got some guys. They got a little bit more skill on that offensive side of the ball than people give them credit for. I think they're going to be able to run the ball against a Chicago team that's been up and down stopping the run. And I think Andy Dalton, he's seen the cover 2. He knows what to expect here. Chicago's been blitzing a little bit more than I thought. I think that that's going to create some opportunities for Dalton to take some shots down the field. I see both teams cracking 20 points in this game. You look at it, it's like, Carolina and Chicago, 2 bad teams, 2 bad offenses. stay away. I think that this one's going to turn into kind of a surprising shootout. And with the low scoring that we have in the NFL, a shootout is now like 24-20. That's like, oh, wow, amazing amount of points scored with the low scoring in the NFL. But I think that this number is actually going to come down. I think you can wait on this one and get even more value closer to kickoff. But I like the over, Carolina, Chicago.
The Carolina's last two games have both gone over, so we'll probably close around 41, 42. I don't think it comes down to 40. We'll see more. We saw last scoring yesterday, last week. 9 out of 13 games went over the total, so I think we'll see a little bit more upward take because the public knows that and they'll bet the over as well. But that's it, boys and girls. There was another episode of getting ready for football this weekend, week 5 in the NFL, week 6 of college football. Don't forget to check us, Doc Sports, out for some great articles. Ringo mentioned about his power rankings. Highly recommend reading that as well. Don't forget to go over to the Doc's YouTube channel and check everyone's free play videos. I was too busy. I didn't do one today. I was going to take the Kansas City Royals. They sweep it. They're going in. I had the series price at plus 155. That would have been my free play, but I didn't do it. But you guys all have a fantastic weekend, a fantastic rest of the week. Enjoy football. Enjoy everything you can. And you know what my segment is. Please don't bet what you don't have. Have a great rest of the week, people.